Okay, hi, welcome back. It's me, Devraj. Mysticism and the Body is the name of this channel. If you're watching it on somewhere else and you're interested in joining this channel, then look for it on YouTube, Mysticism and the Body. And this is my third presentation about the Zohar, cornerstone work of Jewish mysticism. And I think, something to always remember about the Zohar, it's a heart-centered work. It's basically, it's a group of rabbis kind of wandering about like second century Judea, outside in the streets, having sort of little adventures and meeting each other and talking about the Torah and falling weeping with joy about mystical insights. It's a very heart-centered kind of concept, and I think when you look at the Western tradition, that can be missing a little bit. The more Western tradition, the Western school of Kabbalah, there's a bit less emphasis on the heart. So just to mention that. This is the third in this series, and I'll be continuing where I left off in an early part of the text, the introductory text. But before I do that, just to make a brief recap, like they do on most Netflix movies, we looked at a couple of really useful concepts from Jewish mysticism. Number one, the Pardes, which I think I've gone on about enough now, which is like the four levels which any text can be interpreted on. Very, very useful concept to understand. Any Jewish mystical text can be interpreted on. And then this notion of the ladder, Jacob's ladder, the idea that there's a ladder inside, that instead of having a kind of fixed intellectual self, as a model for how our inner subjectivity functions. Instead, this kind of ladder where the intellectual self is on one rung, but you can kind of move forwards or backwards into more diffuse godlike realms as well. And let me just expand a little bit on that. I made a couple of diagrams that might be useful earlier, because this concept has been around for a while. And often what's used to denote the different rungs are these kind of rep digits, triplicities of digits 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, 6, 7, 7, 7. Many of these, if you've been into Western or Jewish mysticism, you'll be familiar with, 666, this idea of a number of a beast, and 888 is the number of Jesus in Greek. Many of these you'll see around the place. So this ladder is going upwards, but really it's going backwards inside of us from kind of like the chest back, metaphorically. So 333 is kind of a rung at the front, when I'm in this hardened kind of self and intellectual self. And then there's relatively diffuse layers moving back, and you're getting to the kind of Christ layer. Now, these things don't have I don't think there's a highly precise correspondence here, though actually someone has tried to make one back about 110 years ago. Let me have a little look at my bits and bobs here, see if I can find what I'm looking for. Yes, this is a picture from kind of Christian Greek mysticism. We see something similar here. Rather dubious-looking character. Certainly, if you saw him wandering around the market, you'd probably call the cops or the psych ward. But obviously some kind of prophet from Greek times, and it's from a book called The Apocalypse Unsealed. Good title for a book about 1910, something like that. I think it was written, and it talks about, it's an interpretation of the Book of Revelation, and it's looking at these kind of layers and the idea of like desire, the lower mind, the cross, storos, blah blah blah, higher minded, and these kind of things. It's trying to articulate things in a similar manner. And this famous picture, this you'll see a lot as well, the idea of a snake around a cross, another esoteric symbol. There's a passage, I think, from Exodus, where Moses has got this kind of, rod with a snake curled around it. He's getting the Kundalini energy to move up the body, basically, and the Israelites are kind of sitting around in awe at this spectacle. But something that's really interesting about this is that it points to a reason why the number 37 is so powerful, both in Christian Greek mysticism and in Jewish mysticism. And the reason for that is because if you extend this ladder down 222111, then the highest number, which can divide into all of these, is 37. 3 times 37 is 111. Also, the numeration of the Hebrew letter Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, but that's a little bit of an aside. But so 37, if you're in this state represented by 37, you can move between these rungs. So this is super important. It gives you a fluidity, a mercurial fluidity of movement. So because 37 is the largest number of all, divide into all of them, including 111. And 37 is most famously known in Jewish Kabbalah as being the number of Yechidah, representing the soul, or what in the West we call a soul. So really it's having this kind of mercurial point inside that can move backwards and forwards, this number 37. It's also a number that's been picked up a lot in the Greek New Testament. Let me find another little image here. Here's another book from 1919, this one, Thomas Simcox Lee, Frederick Bly Bond, Materials for the Study of the Apostolic Gnosis. And this famously has about 500 different names of Christ from the Greek New Testament, all of which are divisible by the number 37. Again, showing that this number has an incredible primacy in both Jewish and Christian mysticism. And as I say, via this concept of the ladder, of internal states, a form of Jacob's ladder, you can understand why these numbers often become very, very important in mysticism. That's a little bit about the ladder. Now let's get back to the Zohar itself. Where were we? Okay, let's just cover a little bit what we did. I know maybe this recall gets to be a bit of a drag, but it also helps me understand things. Few crows. I've got the window open today. I thought, it's a Zohar thing. It's good to have a bit of Istanbul regional noises going on. It's Kurban Bayram today, actually. But anyway, let's have a. So we looked at the importance of the word "who" when directed internally. It points up to this idea of heaven above, and then if you go back, it points you back down the ladder. And if you travel down the ladder a certain level, then you ask the question "what?" The question "what" is a very deep question. Then what really is the world? It becomes increasingly mysterious, the world, as you travel back down the ladder, and being able to cope with that level of mystery is not easy. Not easy. We have psychological defenses. We have nervous system defenses. It's not easy. It's a journey to go back down this ladder, an inner psychological journey. And then we looked last time at this idea of what can I compare to you? This idea of this classical kind of Jewish idea, also found in Yitzhak Lurianic Kabbalah, the earth in a kind of pre-fallen state, but about to fall, and God in this kind of state, seeing that he's going to descend into like what is now 8 billion little kind of mini gods, all of whom just see themselves as a limited psychological entity, or the overwhelming majority of whom do, and this lamentation of what can I compare to you? What can I take as a witness to you? And looking this up, I think I've got quite a chunk of it, but I don't know if I've got all of it completely, and it's certainly I get this, the witness, shahid, I think in Arabic, it's probably the same kind of thing in Aramaic, and this is quite a mystical idea which I can't actually remember right at this moment, but I will look it up sometime. But this idea that this concept of heaven was created for the fallen God of the self, the limited self, to give them something to aim towards, and this word "who" will heal you. Directing the word "who" inside takes you back down, takes you to the concealed high rung in which all exists, will heal you and raise you up. So we continue along. Who is the end of heaven above? What is the end of heaven below? So remember, these are not questions; these are statements. The word "who" tracks you back to the end of heaven above, and the word "what" to the end of heaven below. So, if you want to map this onto like a tree of life, because I know people love the tree of life. I'm not wildly fussed about it. I do use it a bit. Yitzhak Luria tree, I think, then something it's probably going to map, if you're familiar with it. Who is kind of pointing back here. It's pointing back to Binar, and this idea, I won't go into the 50 gates of Binar and being dissolved in mystery to access the 50th gate, blah, 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 but it's pointing back in this direction. So that, and it says, and it said earlier on in the text, after that there is no question. You can't get further back than that with the question who. And then when you've got to who, the question what is pointing down here to Malkut, I believe, to Malkut. So that's really on the tree of life. This is the limit of heaven above. The question who, directed internally. This is the level of heaven below, Malkut or Shekinah, directed internally. Back to the text. Jacob inherited this, running from end to end, Exodus 26:20. From first end who to last end what? For he stands in the middle. So who created these? So again, it's kind of recapitulating, I think, this idea. I mean, sometimes you get this running from end to end. I think in the Sefer Yetzirah, another Jewish kind of cornerstone, much shorter Kabbalistic text, that this idea of a kind of lightning flash, something almost like alternating current, flashing down, flashing back, flashing down, flashing back. But also, I think more clearly, it's again a metaphor for this ladder. The idea that this character is moving from end to end. I don't think Jacob has a gematria of 37. It would be certainly pretty cool if he did, but I don't think he does. But that's, again, it's this idea of being able to move fluidly along this inner ladder of different forms of selfhood. For he stands in the middle. So I think that's referring probably to Tiparet, and the possibility that from there, who can go this way, what can go this way down. So who created these? And we'll get to this a little bit later on, I think, the word who created these. Let's not get into Elo and Elohim just yet. We'll get there. So Rabbi Shimon said, Elazar, my son, cease your words so that the concealed mystery on high, unknown to any human, may be revealed. Now, I think it doesn't click here, but I seem to recall from before that Dr. Matt has put a little thing in here saying that this phrase, cease your words, that may be a slightly tricky translation from this kind of, the Zohar is written in a weird form of Aramaic, which is a language similar to Hebrew, I think. Apologies to people who know about these things if that's wildly off base. But I think really what it's saying, is the idea is not just shut up, Elazar. It's more like, by not expressing and going inside, the mystery on high, unknown to any human, may be revealed. So again, we're kind of, when we're not creating this sense of intellectual selfhood, this kind of 222, 333, 444 kind of lower rung of a ladder self. When there's no thought going on, or when you're not attached to thinking, it's kind of Buddhist kind of concept, then the mystery is revealed. The self dissipates. This hardened sense of self starts to dissipate. Buddhists do things like Vipassana and this kind of thing. It's a meditation technique to still the mind a bit, or to not associate with it all the time, not be so attached to thinking. So, it's kind of reinforcing what was said earlier. Rabbi Elazar was silent. Rabbi Shimon wept and paused for a moment. Then he said, Elazar, what is these? So this is going back to this who is these, what is these? If you answer stars and constellations, they are always visible there and were created by what, as is said. By the word of Yahweh, the heavens were made. So, having asked this question, who, then the question, what, kind of gives you the root of this created world around you. As for things concealed, such would not be referred to as these, for that word indicates something revealed. This mystery was only revealed one day when I was at the seashore. Elijah, famous Old Testament prophet, came and asked me, Rabbi, do you know the meaning of who created these? I asked, these are the heavens and their array, the work of the blessed Holy One. Human beings should contemplate them and bless him, as is written. When I behold your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and stars that you set in place, Yahweh, our Lord, how majestic is your name throughout the earth. So I think what he's talking about here is roughly the same kind of thing, that this word who takes you right back to this kind of Binah state. And then and that the word these elo in Hebrew, isn't really applicable. There's a deeper mystery here. So I think he's saying Elijah came and showed me, Rabbi Shimon saying this, that there's a deeper mystery here. Okay, so I think that's enough for this lesson 3. I know it's very slow progress, but I kind of enjoy going into this stuff a bit deeper myself as well, and trying to work out what's going on and looking at other people's interpretations and getting my own insights. And I recommend you do the same. The Zohar is a completely incredible book, and I think when you start to just get into it a little bit, it can give you a great deal, particularly if you've got some level of mystical awareness already. Okay, my name's Devraj. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you back again soon for some more mysticism and the body.